Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Ancestral Wisdom and Healing. This is Denise King Francisco, and I am joined by David Cad Sturken and Nicole Fix. Hey, you two, how are you tonight?
Hi. Doing well.
I'm
Excellent. Good. It's good to have you here. Hey, Lady Hawk. Hey, Jessica. Good to have you in the chat room. And Sierra, if you're listening, hello, sweetheart. I hope you're having a wonderful evening, and I'm sending you a great big hug from here in Michigan in the studio. And for those of you that are listening, wherever you happen to be around Grandmother Earth, the chat room is open. Please do join us. We'd love to have you here with us for a conversation about our ancestors and the rhythm of nature, getting close to Grandmother Earth. We just celebrated Imbolc. And Kat, I know that you're somebody who celebrates Imbolc. What is it about that turning of the wheel for you that brings you closer to Grandmother?
One of the things that I really like to focus on Imbolc is it's kind of moving from the period of hibernation, rest, to really starting to think about what are the things that I've been stewing or thinking about during that time. How do I want to make those things start to happen? So it's kind of moving from that place of quiet and rest to a place of action. And so the last several weeks, I've been spending time thinking, okay, how do I want to manifest this in my life? How do I want to move forward with this? And what are the steps that I would like to do in relationship to that? And so those are the kinds of things that I'm focusing on. Also being very appreciative of the fact that we have more light now in the evenings, that we're starting to see, more light time during the daytime. So I'm enjoying that again.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Cad. And Nicole, for you, what is this time of the year? What does it mean for you as the days here in Michigan seem to be getting a bit longer?
Yeah, there's like, I love this time of year I love from winter solstice to the Imbolc time of just how the darkness gives us pause. We have the joy of the holidays and then the pause and of just the depth of the darkness, I guess. But then it turns, right, after like 6 weeks around the Imbolc period, and we start to notice the days getting longer, and there's just like the birds, the sound of them starts changing, and you can feel like spring approaching. So I love just that little switch that happens. And what that can mean, like what Cad was saying, of just like what that can mean, like that we've been planting, but then that will be starting ripening for springtime where, things get rebirthed.
I love that. Todd and I have been noticing out here in the Enchanted Forest, robins singing already. And for me, when I hear a robin sing, it makes me feel, oh my goodness, spring is right around the corner. And I find it interesting that this year, it is cold here in Michigan right now. And to hear a robin singing when it's 1 degree outside is quite a juxtaposition, but it brings me hope when I hear a robin.
Yeah.
Yes, hope. That's a perfect way to kind of put it. It's like hope returns.
Exactly. Yeah. When we're talking about the rhythms of nature and our ancestors, with the both of you, is this something that you gained an appreciation for as you got older, or were you already observant of the fact that at this time of the year the days get longer, the sun comes out or it stays out longer, and paying attention to the fact that it's a new moon? Is that something that you were always aware of and ensconced in, or is that something that came with age?
Well, go ahead, Nicole. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay. So for my answer is no, that was not something I always, at least was consciously ensconced in. But my birthday is at the end of February, so like I've always taken a liking to this time of year without knowing I think that it is some of the hope that is being stirred up within us, the longer days, but you still have like kind of a little bit of both, right? Like where you have a little bit of the winter and the sacred quiet and solitude in that, combined with the hope and anticipation for spring and the renewal process. So I like that magical in-between time that I think I always kind of associated with this time unknowingly, that it was part of the sacred nature of the seasons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I have to say, for me, I was oblivious, totally oblivious to really any of this until probably about, well, maybe it kind of started 5 years ago. But, I think it was just the busyness of my life and the fact that my attention was other places. And it was really interesting because I remember one summer, and maybe it was spring, I don't remember, but just realizing that not all the flowers bloom at the same time. That different ones bloom throughout the summer. And then starting to realize how my body felt as I started to notice the seasons changing. I find that I have a little bit of sorrow somewhat when we move from the summer to the fall. My body kind of goes into this almost like not a deep depression, but kind of a little depression. And it's not something that's a pathology, but it's just something I notice. I'm kind of getting a little bit sad about things, and maybe it's kind of that acknowledgement that time of year is when we start to see things falling off the trees and things starting to die and things. But I've noticed it this year for myself. I really seem to be more in tune. And I think a lot of that is the pandemic. We have had to slow down. We've had to quiet ourselves. And I think for me personally, it's allowed me to be more in tune with my body as well as what's going on around me. And I think that it's kind of been just a perfect situation to really make me aware of how those things impact me and why I might want to, and how I might want to think about life during certain aspects of the seasons and things like that. So yeah, it's something for me that I feel like, boy, I wish I had known this or done this kind of stuff early on in my age. It seems like as I'm getting to be more, well, I'm going to be 58 in a couple days.
Uh-huh.
It seems to be growing. It's more of an awareness in me, and maybe it may be just part of me aging as well. So,
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm just wanting to add that, Tab, you bring up such a great point of like how the pandemic has slowed us down to the point of getting more in touch with the natural rhythm of the seasons, right? And the blessings that might come from that, and the stillness that we would normally be too busy to even pay attention to. So
one of the things that I love in studying ancestors and ancestral philosophies and spirituality and religions is that when we take our bloodlines back, however far we need to take them back, we find that our ancestors didn't feel that they were separate from nature, that they were actually part of nature, not only observers, but they were actually a part of the working cogs or the intelligence of the turning of the wheel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely.
Hmm. Even in watching, Todd and I have enjoyed all these years of watching Vikings on the History Channel, and watching even the way in which the gods represented elements and nature, the ocean or the sky or Grandmother Earth, that they were actually given names. And so they didn't think of the earth as simply something that you toiled, but that she was an alive being. And so whether you called her grandmother or you called her Gaia or our earthly mother, the heavenly father, the all father, they were looked at as beings alive.
Yeah. Yep.
And still to this day in many indigenous cultures, nature is not looked at as something separate, but something that is part of us and we are part of it. And I feel as though many more children right now are being brought up to understand this idea. How do you feel about that, Nicole? I mean, Sophia's a little one, and she's quite the intelligent little woman. And it seems to me that she's pretty well versed in the fact that she's not separate from nature.
Yes, and we definitely, as her parents, are wanting to be, intentional about keeping that belief intact. But yeah, she talks about, that. Did you know, Mom? I may have shared this before, but that the earth is an angel, or the sun is an angel, and just things that, might seem absurd to an adult, right? Or certain adults, but that is like old, wise wisdom of being one with nature. So, yeah.
Yeah. I remember years ago, I had a young lady, 7 years old, who came to see me. Her father was a little concerned that maybe her imagination was something that needed some therapy. And the mother said, no, I think she's onto something. So let's have her talk to Denise. And this young girl explained to me that the maple tree in her front yard was the favorite of the squirrels because the squirrels knew that that was a happy tree. And the oak tree, she said, is very crabby, and that's why the birds and especially the squirrels go to the maple tree, because they know the maple tree is happy. And she said to me, the only one that waves to me when I come home from school is the maple tree. The oak tree never says a word.
Wow.
And I looked at the mom and dad and I said, and so your daughter has relayed an observation, and do you agree with her observation? And they both looked at me and said, she's right. I thought that was brilliant.
That's awesome.
It is.
And it's like she is so right. She's observing what she is seeing, and she's paying attention, and that's, part of the joy of that inner child and just being a child is that you're not so busy with life and stress and whatever that you can really be in tune and attuned, right, to what's happening in the nature world, the natural world.
I love that. Thank you, Nicole. David, from your shamanic perspective, do you ever feel as though some of these young children that have come back that are so perceptive to these things, that they are actually our ancestors who've come to remind us of the cycles?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, as the children I see coming into the world now seem, yeah, as you said, it almost feels like, well, definitely they've been here before, but it almost feels like they're trying to get us to move back to that way of being more connected. You know, one of the things I think about in relationship to our ancestors is their spirituality was just part of their everyday practice.
Yes.
You know, it was never a separate thing. It was, you know, when I'm tending, as you said, tending the soil, I'm tending the mother. When I'm, you know, out in the woodside, you know, connected to the tree is, you know, is my brother, and the animals are my brothers. And one of the things I think I feel like that happened when spirituality turned more into a religion where you actually have to go someplace to worship, is that it caused a little bit of disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are no longer, your spiritual practice feels more about, okay, on this day I go and do this at church, versus it about it being just something that I'm doing every single day. And I think kids teach us that. You know, when you watch a child when they're playing outside, you know, they're talking to the bugs, they're talking to the sand, they're talking to the trees, you know, anything. It's that connection. You know, and sometimes they eat the sand because they think it's just part of them. So, you know, it's just I love watching kids play outside because it's their element. Mm-hmm. And it's like they're saying, yeah, this is really, you know, this is where I feel connected. This is where I really feel alive. And versus you know, the sitting inside with, you know, the iPad or the, you know, the computer. And again, those aren't necessarily bad things. They're tools that we have in our culture now that are very helpful, but it's trying to bring that balance back to that again.
How do you feel about that, Nicole, as the mother of a young one?
Yeah, I think, you know, there is, well, a couple of thoughts. One about just the symbolism and like the church being something outside of ourselves, right? Separate from, and just what Cad was saying about, you know, and it can be so meaningful. So not to be dismissive at all of that meaning and fulfillment that it brings so many people, but that also this, you know, remembering each day how we are one, and that we are connected to that intuitive force, that God force within us. But that kids that naturally have that, right, of just remembering how, I don't know, magical just outdoor play is, right, and where the imagination comes alive and being at one with nature. So, yeah, it's so fun to watch too, right? When you can see kids outside with their imagination, like Sophia and her friends with playing outside, and just she's at a great age for just the imagination being so alive and making, right, the stew and everything with the sand and the dirt, and yes, probably eating dirt, but that's okay.
I love it. That's outstanding. I think one of the things I've really appreciated, you know, as I really rounded into my 40s, is how our ancestors incorporated the tides of the moon and star alignments in sacred ceremony. And even in the Catholicism that I grew up in, and very, very, my life has been very steeped in. It wasn't really until I made a trip to France a couple of years back and we journeyed up to Saint Baume in France, and that is said to be the place where Mary Magdalene, after the time of the crucifixion, she made her way to France with Joseph of Arimathea. And she made her way up to this mountainside cave, which would become her final home and ultimately where she passed on. And it is where her relics, etc., are there. It's now a church, a very humble cave church, actually. But what floored me was that in the little gift shop sort of lodge that you find yourself in before you make the what felt like a 5-year journey up the side of the mountain to get to the cave were all of the symbols and the books and the materials of the star constellations as they relate to Mary Magdalene and the teachings of the Magdalene. I was fascinated by that because that was an aspect that in my upbringing and in all the years of catechism that I attended, we didn't talk here in the West about the saints and correlations, correspondences, or teachings about the stars. And so, for instance, in that little shop, I bought a beautiful piece, a pendant that is the constellation Scorpius. For me, that was a real eye-opener, that if we go back far enough, even in religion and into the mystical portions of any religion, we find out that even in religions there is there's an understanding of the stars, of the tides of the moon, of the sun, the constellations, etc., and wisdom teachings that come out of those. Fascinating. Of course, we all know about the Magi and how they followed the star for a couple of years, etc., etc. But somewhere that gets lost, doesn't it, in some of the religious traditions of our ancestors until we go back far enough.
Well, yeah, the one thing that I've always been very fascinated with our Native American brothers and sisters is, they refer or discuss a lot the moon time for the woman, and what a powerful time that is, and how how that men are not. The ceremonies with men and women need to be very separate at that time, and that is a very, very powerful time for women. And and I think I feel like, and of course I'm not an expert, but I feel like that aspect, as you said, some of that information has gotten lost. About the sacredness of that. We've kind of made that something that is not talked about, and in some ways talked about in not a good way. But just the power of, as you said, the moon, relationship to the cycles of the woman, and how and my guess is that many, if you ask many women or girls at this time, they wouldn't see that as a powerful time in their lives. They would oftentimes see that as potentially something negative.
Shame and blame has been applied to some of it. Yeah.
Yes. So I've always been fascinated by kind of astrology and the stars. I'm no way an expert. I don't, I only just understand a little bit. But I start to, again, it's something that as I'm getting older, I understand the impact of cycles of the moon on my body, and I love just looking at the stars. But I'm not one who really says, "Oh, there's that constellation or that constellation." it's something I would have to study more. But I love just peering up into a clear sky and seeing the moon and the stars.
Mhm.
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 And I think of that, Dana. I think that time when we were at the Sweat Lodge at Barbara's, and we came out that night. And, I mean, the sky was just.
Mhm.
lit up
We
with
were part of the Milky Way.
Yes, I mean,
Mhm.
it's just amazing. You know, when you can get away from the artificial light and just see the stars, it's a totally different experience than looking up into it when you're in the city.
Mhm.
Mm. How do you feel about anything that Cad just said, Nicole? I mean, when it comes to a woman's moon cycle, it is one of those mysteries, those beautiful mysteries that, like the mysteries of Mary Magdalene, that shame, blame, all kinds of things were attached to Mary Magdalene as the story was handed down that were absolute nonsense, handed down by the patriarchy. And with the moon cycles, I mean, I've been at sun dances where the medicine man will stop a sun dance and say, there's a woman who just entered the arena who's on her moon. Find out who it is and just let her know that she can't be here.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not for a shameful reason. It's because it's such a powerful time
Mhm,
that it makes it bends the energy
Yep.
of the ceremony. What's your observation about any of that, Nicole?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking just, how unfortunate is that the most powerful time of a woman's life, well, maybe life, but month, I guess, is seems so shameful, burdensome, cumbersome, rather than like the power and the beauty in it. And emotions can be really intense, but sometimes they're emotions that have been so suppressed and are needed to guide someone in decision making or realization of the importance of self-care or something, that if we can get in the rhythm of that, it can really be a time for deep reflection. So, finding the power in being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would love to see that coming back, and I think it is in some ways, right?
Well, it is because
people,
Aquarius is upon us, and we are within Aquarius, which is the return of the female to the table, the ladies of the realm returning to the table of the knights of the realm. So the equilibrium is rebalancing, and Aquarius is overlighted by the Sophia, by the water bearer Gabriel, which is the wisdom of the Sophia, and the wisdom of Gnosis, the hidden wisdom. So all of these hidden wisdoms are now returning. Whether we want to believe it or not, or whether we want to accept it or not, Aquarius says she's back. And she is joining the male at the head of the table once again. Previous to this was Pisces. Before Pisces was Aries. Before Aries was Taurus. So we went from Taurus, which is somewhat feminine and artsy, and those, gave birth to wonderful poets and that sort of a thing, and Aries, which is the god of war and forcefulness and the male will, into the time then of Pisces, which is the very beginning of a segue, getting ready for Aquarius. And Aquarius being, we made it through Aries, we got through Pisces, and she's ready to return. And with that, the understanding once again that we are part of the wheel. We're part of, as Amantha Murphy would say, we are part of the weave. And what we do in our part of the weave influences the entirety of the weave. So for me, even, sitting here in my space, talking to the both of you and the ladies in the chat room, I find it absolutely magical and spectacular that all of us, I mean, Cad, you have a very professional life at the hospital. Nicole, you have a very professional life as a therapist. I'm retired from my corporate life of 33 years at a major newspaper. And I believe that the three of us are like representatives of exactly what we're talking about right now. You could have that, but balancing it now with the understanding that there's far more, and there's far more yet to come, because our ancestors are speaking to us and influencing us, and or they're being reborn at this time to be here physically as teachers, and Cad's there to catch them at the hospital. Isn't that marvelous?
Yeah, you know, kind of the whole concept too of needing to bring back the ideas of rites of passage, and the need for that within our culture, because you know, talking about womb time, you know, as a girl moves into that type or that phase of her development, you know, making that a beautiful time. You know, I remember a man talking about that she, with her daughters, that she actually did that, and you know, making it a ceremony and something that is, you know, an acknowledgement of that moving on, you know, and as well as the transitions into, you know, midlife and to elderhood, and you know, it just seems to me that people are yearning for that type of experience that was, I think, deeply held by many of our ancient ancestors. You know, it was just it was a natural part of their life. It was just a natural part of kind of certain of those ceremonies took place at certain times of the year, and it just kind of was just very natural, and it feels, as we've become more civilized, if I can say that it feels like it's become unnatural, and that is what I think I'm hoping that we're starting to see, that people are going to move more into that. It just feeling more natural, and what we want, and this is what we want to bring back again. Yeah.
Jessica in the chat room, she is an educator from New Hampshire, and she is agreeing, saying, absolutely, our kids really need special rites of passage. Well, and Nicole, for you, Sophia goes to Catholic school, so there are rites of passage that she will experience being Catholic, from First Communion to Confirmation, to all of those religious rites of passage. And I love the thought, Cad, as you put it out, about having, you know, the maiden mother crone saging ceremonies, as well as, and I think that we can kind of make up our own along the way when we deem them appropriate. How do you two feel about that?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I've thought about that myself, and I love that's such a great thing to bring up, Cad, because like just wanting like to make it like this special time, because like I think of, especially when a woman becomes a mother, right? Like and when a girl becomes a woman, and then the woman becomes the crone, because there is, and I know this same exists with men too, right? But like,
absolutely, yeah.
It's such a monumental time, and there's so much grief there, and so much rebirth there, right? And so like to have some way to honor the death and the rebirth that's all simultaneously occurring is so crucial, you know?
Right.
And I just think of the postpartum women I work with who, you know, there's so much in the world of, oh, you become a mom, it's the best time of your life. It's, you know, we talk about all the joy in it, but we don't talk about the death of the girl and the hardship that can be present too. And not everyone feels that way, but a lot of women do. That's like, we need to hold sacred space for that, and to do it through a ritual is just a way to really highlight and emphasize the sacred nature of that.
Well, and we talk about, we're talking about the seasons in nature, but these are also the seasons of our life.
Yes.
Oh, they're just as important as, and one of the things I personally believe that the crisis that many men go through, we talk about that midlife crisis, is because we don't really have any type of ceremony, any type of initiation. There's this belief that in some way, I think there's this shift that they feel like who they are as a man has changed significantly, and it has. But that's not a bad thing. It's just part of the natural process. But we've created this masculine ideal that kind of falls out of that. What do I want to say? The order of that, and so men get in that panic, and they react in ways that sometimes people see as crazy. But having those rites of initiation, I think could so be helpful in situations like that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And Nicole, one of the things that you said about honoring the death and the rebirth in those cycles, because there is something about all of that, and there's something about Western culture and the vanity in our culture. Not for everybody, but it is very present here in the United States. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Thank you, Kardashians. That I've met people that have said to me, so what are you going to let your grandson call you? Well, what do you mean? What am I going to let him call me? I hope he calls me Granny, because there's just something, fun about Granny. You would let your grandson call you Granny? That makes you so old. And Tad, you can appreciate this because I said, do you know what it is like for me as an adopted person to actually have in my life a second generation that I can look at and hold, and he gets to call me Gran or Granny or Grammy? Just don't call me Ray, right? You can call me Ray. But the point is, and so anyway, this woman said to me, well, I don't let any of my grandchildren call me grandma or any of that. They just call me by my name. Because otherwise I feel really old.
Yeah.
Like old is a bad thing.
Thank you. Like old is a bad thing. And I said, well, I think that I've earned every mile on the odometer of my life.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that I have, when I go out to South Dakota, I don't even know how many Takoshas I have anymore. I have so many of them, and I adore them. And the fact that any of them looks up to me and calls me Unchi, that is the best thing in the whole world, because it gives, for me, a sense of accomplishment in my life.
Yeah. That is one of the things that I just think is so beautiful about our native brothers and sisters. I remember one time when we were being served a meal out there. This is probably, I can't remember how many. They served the elders first.
Yeah.
And I do remember when we were at the casino, and the waiter asked me how old I was. I thought, well, what do you ask me how old I am for? And I was 50. He said, well, you get the senior discount. I thought, oh, okay, well, but there's a respect, there's an honor, and we've lost our obsession with youth and our obsession with with body type. Has, again, it's out of balance.
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of what this seems like needs to be restored, is kind of that balance again. beauty of each stage of life, and the gifts that it brings. Not only the gift that it brings to me, but the gift that I have that I can then share with someone else. And each stage has its gifts, and so helping people acknowledge what those gifts are in each of those stages is a really important part of this. I see kind of as bringing the balance back to what our ancestors probably were doing very naturally.
Mm-hmm. Del Marie is in the chat room, and she's saying we are honored to be called Grandma or Unchi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And have both of you observed in your lives? I think a long time ago, you were a ripe old crone if you lived to be 40, right?
Really? Crazy, yes.
Isn't that?
You're right.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, 80 is the new 40, or whatever it is now. And so, my point in all of that is, as we've in our humanity, we are living longer. What I've observed is that there really isn't necessarily a timeline for mother and crone, because women are having children older, sometimes at a point in life when 40 or what have you would have been considered old. And you didn't live to be a grandmother into your 80s or 90s unless you were like Yoda, right? And so the timelines are very different right now. And so it's almost another natural rhythm to becoming a mother, a father, a sage, or a crone based on an individual's life cycle and life experience. I mean, how do you feel about that?
I would agree, because I think we could put we could say, well, this is kind of the area, or this is kind of the age where we see mother, maiden, crone, but there are some folks that would be entering their crone ages or their mother age at a very different time. And so I think, from my perspective, it seems like a very individual thing, and helping someone understand that and being so in tune with their body. See, that's the other piece that I think that we've not really. I think we've lost the really in tune with our body. I guess essentially is what I'm saying is it feels like we are so much in our head and so much intellect that we've gotten out of that knowing what the cycles of our body need. And so really understanding and helping people understand that your body is going to kind of give you the information you need to kind of, as you're moving from one stage of life to the next, and helping people appreciate that along the way.
I like that. How do you feel about that as a woman and also as a therapist, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts, but one is just, bringing back the benefit, the meaning of the wisdom that comes with aging, right? And the beauty in that, and the gift in that, and how much we need that. And so making it, that sacred place for us to look forward to and to look at it as a way of like a gift. And then I'm thinking too about how so much trauma is stored in the body too. So often even symptoms of anxiety, it's just like being in our head so much because the body becomes unsafe. And that's where, trauma is stored through our feelings and our bodily sensations. So how there's so much right now, I think, coming up for healing. And people, though, that are willing to do it. Like, I see so much of this evolution in our society of moving into this more evolved state of wanting to do healing. And I know our ancestors are part of that, as people wake up and to the wisdom within our bodies, within our ancestral lineage, and how healing the trauma is part of that, and how we can move into a more evolutionized, ideally a more of a self-actualized state as we do that healing, and how that might shift how we see different ages too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Del Marie is saying, I used to think my mother was old when she was 69, 70. Now, me being that age, I don't accept being old. Laugh out loud. Yeah. I think that for many of us, the pandemic and not being able to get to the hairdresser was an opportunity to see what we look like in for me, my pure white hair. And I didn't mind it. I liked it. I thought it was kind of cool, Cruella de Vil looking there for a half a minute. Todd thought it was marvelous, this white shock of hair. But Dane, my son, had a real problem with it. And I know that his problem with it was not how it looked on me, but what the white hair represents to him, which is mom is getting old, and how long is mom going to be here if her hair is white. So for him, it indicated getting closer to the end.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, which is part of the rhythm of nature that is really tough for us to discuss here in the West.
Yes, and even, part of that fear of aging, but then fear of death too, and what that means, and
one of the things that has actually been coming up for me in my meditations in the last couple of weeks is how important it is to welcome a child into the world.
Yes.
I think about many children that may not have been welcomed into the world because of either, this was an unwanted pregnancy, or because of some trauma that may have happened that related to the pregnancy, or just, other things. But how the impact of not welcoming the child into the world can have a significant impact on them long term. And how important, again, as we're talking about rites of passage and ceremony and things like that, the importance of integrating that into the birth of a child, so that they are. Because, you think about children when they're born at the hospital, it's a very sterile environment. It's, the kid gets sometimes a whack on the butt, that kind of stuff to get them, and they're doing better with having birthing rooms and things. But oftentimes, again, the environment isn't always as welcoming as it could be. And helping the parents then go through the experience of welcoming that child, and what does that mean? So it's just another thing I thought I'd bring up because of the thing. And I think probably, Dana, it's because, and you can probably appreciate this, we're adopted children.
Right.
And
so not only was there not a welcome to the world, it was here you are and you're on to the next.
Yeah.
And there's angst in the birth to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah.
When the first time that I was able to hold Easton, I think at the time he weighed just over 2 pounds, and he was hooked up to all the NICU wiring and stuff, and he was actually laying on a pillow because his body was still too fragile for me to hold. But I remember holding him, and I had already welcomed him to the world, but I remember the first time that I held him, that I recited to him who his ancestors are, including, interestingly, Del, you'll appreciate this, including all of his grandmas and his grandpas on the reservation. So that some of the very first words that he would hear from his grandmother would be who his people are. And for me, that was really important for him to know that. And Nicole, I know for you that Sophia's birth was very natural and with a midwife. And for you, what was that experience of welcoming Sophia to this earth plane?
It was so so empowering, very magical. Yeah, we did opt for a natural birth, and we were blessed to be able to have one. And it was at a birthing center, so it was more like a home birth. And it was dark. It was almost midnight when she finally arrived, and the candles were lit. It was, early January. Snow was falling. It was not perfect by any means. There was definitely some trials and tribulations, both physically and mentally. But when she arrived, right, she was welcomed by such joy and gratitude and welcoming. And, you had an altar going for her.
We did.
Right. And she was so present in her body, always her soul, because of that. I know that was part of it, and welcoming her in and ushering her down, singing her down. And yeah, she just has a presence and a confidence about her, knowing she was wanted, and I love that idea, Kat, of being able to bring that richness to the hospital or to the mainstream birth experience, because all of these souls, all of us that come down, we need to know how wanted and special we each are.
Yeah. And I wonder, too, if, I guess when I think back, before we had hospitals, when it was a midwife or a family member that was delivering the baby for a particular person in the home generally, to me, it seems like that experience was probably much more of a sacred experience, because you were surrounded by those who loved you, oftentimes. Many times probably your brothers and sisters may have been there, grandma and grandpa or whoever. And as we're talking about, the seasons and how that weaves into our life. It just seems to me like that is another part of, kind of that Eastern door, that new life. And for many, it would seem like that was just more of an experience where they were celebrating. Mm-hmm. They were celebrating that birth. Yeah. And as we have evolved as a culture and things, that it seems like we've lost some of that.
Mm-hmm. In the chat room, Jessica is saying, I really appreciate how this conversation has followed the cyclical aspects of nature, from birth to death, and the importance of supporting each other. And Del Marie is talking about the Lakota midwives were chosen wisely, and they performed welcoming ceremonies. My mother was trained as a midwife. And Catherine, you wanted to hear Cad talk a little more about something. Will you type that in the chat? What I wanted to add on the heels of what we were just talking about, for any of you out there, a welcoming to the earth plane doesn't necessarily just have to happen at birth. So if you have an adopted child, or you have a foster child, or maybe you are the adopted child or the foster child, you can have that ceremony where you are now in your life. Because even as the adult is going through the ceremony, your inner child will hear it, and they will experience it. So it's not a missed opportunity, Kat. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it is something that can be created at any time in anyone's life to honor that piece. Catherine is saying she wanted, Denise, do you remember the calling of names in the four directions? Yes, I do, Del. Yep.
The other piece that I think is as important is when a mother delivers and the baby is not alive.
Yeah.
That is just that experience can be beautiful. It can also be very, it's tragic, but can be made into a beautiful ceremony, and still recognizing that life as valued and part of who the part of the experience of what the mother has carried for the last 9 months. I think we have to kind of bring some of the sacredness back to these experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lady Hawk is saying she wants to learn more about how to help welcoming a child in. Mm-hmm. Well, for instance, with little sweetheart Sophia, Todd and I, we consider ourselves to be her auntie and her uncle. And we created a beautiful altar specifically for Sophia. And every evening, Lady Hawk, we lit that candle every evening. And he and I, in the silence, makes me emotional talking about it. In the silence of our minds, we would talk to her soul, and to let her know that she was going to be so loved when she got here. And we were just waiting for her to come. And then Todd and I would talk about, well, I wonder what she'll look like. I wonder what it'll be like for David and Nicole. And so we were having conversations out loud and within our own silent selves with her. And I did the very same with Easton. And a couple of other times I've been asked to do that. So I just created a sacred space specifically. And I took a photo of it and I sent it to David and Nicole so that they could see the sacred space that we had created for her. It was honored to be asked and to be able to do that because it's such sacred work welcoming a soul. I mean, Cad, what would you add to that? You are a pediatric nurse practitioner, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, so one of the things I'll say is I remember during nursing school being able to witness a birth. And, I mean, when the mom, it still makes me emotional. When she delivered, I cried. I cried. There wasn't, to see that miracle. Again, I would love to see us integrating more of this kind of welcoming experience. And maybe, Dana, I don't know, maybe it's class we can think of creating at school. How do you do it, and what would it be like, and just give some thoughts and ideas, and just something for us, I guess, to ponder. But it seems, for me, and I'll tell you, as an adopted child, I was told by someone that was doing some work on me that one of the challenges that I had in this life was because I was not welcomed into the world, and that I was still trying to grieve, or I was still grieving from that, and trying to maneuver my way through the world without having been welcomed. And so I think that's probably why this is coming up for me right now, and why I think it's so important.
Del Marie is saying that would be wonderful, pertaining to a class, and Catherine is saying yes, please, a class. Nicole, since we've kind of have ended on this note tonight, as the mother giving birth to Sophia, how did it feel for you becoming a mother in that moment and bringing a beautiful soul into the world, knowing that there were others, it was more than just me and Todd, that there were others holding you and David and Sophia?
Yeah, it was very reassuring and comforting, because there hit a moment where it was both a physical and mental hiccup, and I, had this moment of terror, especially not being at a hospital where there can be life-saving mechanisms, seconds away. So in remembering that, and remembering just all of the work that had been done coming up and with her soul, right? The soul work of bringing her here to earth, it helped me flip a switch when I needed to flip the switch of like, God damn it, this is going to work. And that I deserve this child, and it is going to be fine. And that was like the empowering turning moment. And so I know that all of those holding sacred space helped me have the power to usher her in and to feel worthy of her.
Wow.
So thank you. Yes.
Wow, that's powerful. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour, and it's time for final thoughts. So, Cad, final thoughts for this evening?
I think my thought is we were talking about how our ancestors managed through the various seasons of life, but I think for me, I think of it also in relationship to the seasons of my life, and how those two things really kind of come together and integrate, and how I would like them to integrate.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kat. And what about you, Nicole? Final thoughts for this evening?
Yeah, I think if we can get into that rhythm of nature, there's a certain trust there, that we need more of in our lives in this world, of trusting that there's something divine unfolding if we can just lean into the rhythm of it. So that's kind of my final thought.
I love that. And my final thought is that it's never too late to perform a rite of passage. And for those of you that are thinking to yourselves, well, I don't know what kind of a rite of a passage, or I don't know what my people did in the 1800s or the 1400s, so I guess I can't have one. And what I would say to everybody is go within your sacred self and create your own ceremony, create your own sacred space to have these. There is no right way or absolutely the only way. There's the way that's between you and spirit and the ceremony at hand. So with that, we will put together, the three of us, a webinar class with regard to the cycles of life and death. I think that would be terrific. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us tonight in the chat room, ladies, and all of you that are out there listening from around the world, and those that will be tuning in. Blessings be everybody. You two have a great night.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.